So, Lord, I pray the words that I am to speak now are the words you need us all to hear at this time. Amen. Occasionally I have bright ideas, and Daniel's not here this morning, and he's usually on the receiving end of my bright ideas, which might be why he's not here this morning. However, I am entirely responsible for the juxtaposition of these two readings. When I put the syllabus together for this term, I thought, that'll work. In 10 minutes' time, you can work out whether I was right or not, can't you? Anyway, so there we go. We have both the parable of the lost sheep and also that of the woman losing the coin, and Paul's personal recollections. And as Jill mentioned, recalling the time when he had been Saul, when he had been persecuting the church. How do these go together? I'll try and work that out in the next few minutes. Well, if you go back, first of all, to the Luke reading, if you have your Bibles out, that'd be fantastic if you can see that. But we remember what's going on here. Jesus is eating with tax collectors and sinners. Now, this is a phrase that occurs quite a bit in the New Testament, particularly around when Jesus is meeting people, and we sort of get an understanding of what's going on. But the way that it was written down by Luke would have been really powerful about these people. Who are these tax collectors and sinners? Well, generally speaking, these are people outside of the covenant of Israel. These are the people that would have been regarded as beyond the pale, not actually part of God's people for whatever reason. And they could very well have been, in the case of the tax collectors, they would have been regarded as traitors. These were local people, Jewish businessmen, who had contracted themselves to the Roman authorities to collect taxes. Now, taxes need to be collected. We could talk about that forever. Taxes need to be collected, but the way the Roman Empire collected taxes was it subcontracted it out to local people and said, we need so much money from this particular province, and anything on top of that that you happen to collect, you can keep. So you can imagine corruption was rife, and they were regarded as outside the covenant people, traitors, because they were taking the nation's wealth and passing it on to the Roman Empire. They are beyond the pale, not properly Jewish, and probably not welcome in the temple. Similarly, these other people regarded as sinners. That's a broad term, isn't it? But again, these would be people who were regarded as beyond the pale. Many commentators suggest there may be prostitutes among them, those who are doing all sorts of things, maybe even criminals, we don't know. But whatever these people were, they were beyond the pale. Good, nice Jews didn't mix with these people, and prospectively, because they would have become ritually unclean, unable to take part in their own worship when they went to the temple. Which is why Jesus eating with them is such a big thing. And we possibly don't get the impact of that, partly because we've read the story so many times, but we're not first century Jews. We don't have an understanding of Jesus just sitting down with the wrong people. How very dare he? How very dare he? And this is the first sentence caused me to stop and think. We kind of want to be Jesus cheerleaders, don't we? No one's beyond the pale. Everyone's saved. Remember, Jesus on the cross for everyone. Everyone is invited into the kingdom until we deal with our own prejudices, and mine are many and varied. And God is trying to point out to me that maybe I should be less of a Pharisee, because there's something of the Pharisee in me. I want the people of God to kind of look a lot like me, which would be a great shame for most of you if that was true. However, we want people of God to maybe have the same expectations that I have, same outlook on life. And I have my own private list of people that I don't think that's going to be, and I guard it very carefully and go, no, not talking to them. And yes, God is saying, you are wrong, pal. You're wrong, pal. Surely, Lord, These BMW drivers, they are children of the enemy. And God, no, they're not. They're my children. Yes, but did you see how I cut me off just then? All right then, if not them, how about the Audi drivers? And God has to take me aside every so often and go, these are my children too. These are my children too. Long list, which goes through lawyers and also, anyway. However, God has to take me aside and point out, I'm too much of a Pharisee, working out boundaries where there are no boundaries. So coming into this passage for the first time, if we're really going to take it as speaking to us, we have to be honest about, I mean, maybe you're all sanguine about this stuff, I don't know. Maybe there are people who are not, no one's beyond the pale, but I suspect for most of us, there's a little list of people who are just a bit beyond the pale. You go, you know what, I can't really see them in church. I'm not sure, maybe I should even share the gospel with them, or I don't want to. And this is the challenge, the first challenge of this story of the lost sheep. Because they can't possibly be on the pale, because Jesus doesn't reject them. He eats with them. To eat with someone is to accept them. Very much so in first century Palestine, of course. If you were eating with someone, you were accepted by them. And Jesus isn't turning his people away. And this is what causes the Pharisees to jump up and down and say, you realize who these people are? You can't possibly be a good Jew yourself if you are eating with these people and accepting them who they are. So then let's have a quick look about the scribes and the Pharisees. We kind of know who they are. They appear in song, among other things. Remember, we sang a few weeks ago, Lord of the Dance. Blimey, that took us back to our Sunday schools, didn't it? Okay, but remember, I danced for the scribe and the Pharisee. They wouldn't dance, they wouldn't follow me. These people are sometimes portrayed by preachers as the enemy. They're not quite the enemy. They should know better. But what the scribes are those who copied the law, knew the law, and taught the law, and the Pharisees had an understanding of the law, particularly in how to keep it. These were people who were trying very hard, which is why Jesus had a relationship with them, occasionally told them off. But they would say, okay, if the law says that is the line, you must be that far away from the line. To keep yourself ritually clean, to keep yourself within God's people. And that's what this is about. People who shouldn't be, according to the Pharisees, within God's people, within the community that's acceptable, Jesus is eating with and automatically making respectable. You can't just do that, can you? And Jesus goes, all right, tell you a story, shall I? And the irony in the parable of the lost sheep kind of comes in very pointedly. He starts off by not talking about someone out in the fields. There was this shepherd once upon a time. None of that. No one who could be actually dismissed as just a story. If you notice how he starts the parable off, it's more pointed than that. He starts off with, which of you? At the Pharisees. You. Okay, talk about you. And presumably these people are quite rich because they may very well have had 100 sheep. Which of you? I'm going to compare God's behavior with your behavior. That's a scary thought, isn't it? Just imagine being on the receiving end of that. Jesus saying, okay, which of you are going to behave this way? And he talks about how this effectively says, if you are going to display compassion in that you will leave your sheep and go and find the one that's lost, how much bigger is God? How much bigger is God's compassion? You might think these people that I'm sitting with are lost, beyond the pale. But actually, if you will go and find a sheep from your human compassion, how much bigger is God's compassion to go and find those who are lost? He admits they're lost, but God is reaching out to them. God has gone to fetch them, bring them back, and will rejoice when they come back into the fold. I like the idea of rejoicing in heaven. Sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it? I'm not quite sure if it means it's exactly that moment or when we get there. No, every time I turn away from something I shouldn't be doing, maybe, hey, Andrew's back. Or maybe we're talking about at the end times when we all make it into heaven and we're going, who's next? It's Catherine, yes! We've got Annie next, yeah! How about that? And there's a celebration. But Jesus wouldn't say about rejoicing if there wasn't rejoicing. You don't want to make stuff up. And this is then something that really heartens me, that actually we are welcomed back, much as the next story along is that of the prodigal son. There is true rejoicing as we turn back to God. How much then, if we come back, should there be true rejoicing when those we think are beyond the pale come back to God? And then I worked out why I put the Timothy passage in. Because I asked myself the question, what's it like from the point of view of the sheep? We've had a look at the point of view of the shepherd going to leave people from their compassion, going out, leaving the rest of the flock going out at cost and at, not just at cost, but at vulnerability. The vulnerability of a shepherd going out into the wild, the danger that it would take for the shepherd to go and find someone. And we now understand that to be the crucifixion. But what's it like from the point of view of the sheep? And this is what brought me to the Timothy passage. This is what brought me to the person of Paul, previously Saul. He didn't know this story. He didn't know very much of what Jesus had actually said. This wasn't something, he wouldn't have gone back to the prodigal son or the parable of the lost sheep and said, aha, that's me. Maybe that's something we can pick up. And we come back to Paul. We've spoken about Paul quite a bit recently. I won't do too much revision. He was prospectively a freed slave, but he himself was a Pharisee. He himself would have been one of those who had said, this is what the law says. These people are beyond the law. And if you look at how he describes himself in Timothy, he now says, but that was blasphemous. To exclude people. I was a blasphemer to exclude people from the community of God. He has gone from being a persecutor to being an evangelist. That was then. And this is now. The lost sheep, from the point of the view of the lost sheep, the sheep can say, that was then when I was lost. And this is now when I'm a new person. Paul is like the lost sheep, only bigger, full of gratitude. So when we put these two passages together, one of the tricks, or one of the ways that I go about reading the Bible, is to try and work out which one of the characters I am in any particular account or story. Which one speaks to me? Which one warns me? Which one encourages me? So maybe we look at the sinner, the Pharisee, or the lost sheep. Sinner, yeah, afraid so. I think we all put our hand up to that. Pharisee, full of judgment. For me, I have to put my hand up to that one as well. Work in progress. Every so often getting a poke from God saying, why are you so judgmental? These people are my children. And maybe for all of us, the lost sheep. After all, we are here. We are here. And maybe the answer to the question, which of those characters am I? The sinner, the Pharisee, or the lost and now found sheep? Maybe we're a mixture of all of those. And for me, the challenge then is, which bit actually shows?